today, as the title suggests, I'm painting some feathers. I'm going to do it on this giant eagle. He's one of the Pathfinder Deep Cuts miniatures. Looks like that. Their paint job's kind of boring. Hopefully I'll make mine a little bit more interesting. I've done the first layer already because it takes a while to dry and I didn't want to just be sitting here doing nothing on stream. So this is just wildwood contrast over the whole thing, and that's to bring out all the little lines in the feathers, at least to begin to. And then, so yeah, we're gonna get started from here. So feathers can be a tricky thing to paint because there's a natural tendency in miniature painting anyway. When you have feathers like this, you have multiple layers of feathers, this layer here, and this layer here. People will have a tendency to paint on those lines, and that isn't really how birds' feathers work. They don't just like have a line of white feathers, then a line of black feathers, a line of brown feathers, or whatever. They sort of have oftentimes feathers are colored multiple colors, and that color sort of fades through the feathers, kind of like with skin. We don't have like a patch of pinker skin, a patch of darker skin, a patch of light skin. Like, you just have your skin color can have variations in it, but it's not just lines of color. It's kind of faded throughout. So we're gonna do something like that. So I'm gonna take this scrag brown here, and I'm going to get it on a beat up brush, and I'm going to get some of it off, and so then I'm going to stipple. I'm going to start at the tips of the wings here, and I'm going to stipple up the wing. The light is being weird. There we go. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to go all along the edge of the wing before I start to build it up along the wing. And you notice how this is another thing that can sometimes get people. I'm not necessarily worried about keeping a smooth line all across the feathers, because that would mean that the tips of these were orange, but almost 2/3 of these were orange. I'm just going to do the tips of all of them. So keep stippling here. And then I'm going to come back to the front, and I'm going to stipple a little bit higher up. And just stipple onto the very tips of the second layer of wings here. Get a little bit more. Trying to come off his base, that's okay. So then in just a couple places, I'm just going to carry the stipple up onto this top layer. And then I'm going to come back and do a second layer of stipple. Rocking a bald eagle. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the feathers around his head a different color. So when I put this first layer on, I just didn't include the head. We'll see how it goes. So then I'm going to come back to that same color, and I'm going to come back to the tips here. And I'm going to stipple again so we have a stronger color out here. Birds aren't known for uniformity. That is true. Absolutely correct. All right, so now we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other wing, but I'm just gonna show you what I do on this wing, and then I'll just do it on the rest of the bird, basically. So I use this scrag brown as my stipple color. So the key here is now you just look at this color and determine what it is, basically. So this is an orangish brownish color. So we'll want a light orange, one of these probably, to be our next color. And you're going to dry brush with this, but you're going to dry brush in a way that might seem, no, I don't know. It might seem a little odd at first. Normally, how we paint things is we'll put a layer down, put maybe a layer or highlight on top of that, and then our next thing will be layered right on top of that, which is how most things are painted. In this case, we're going to take our lighter color here. In this case, Luganeth Orange, if it'll focus, yep. And we're going to dry brush, make sure 99% of this paint is off our brush. And then we're going to dry brush not onto this that we did up here, but starting about here and only moving our brush in this direction. So starting about here. Moving this way. And then same thing we did with the orange up there in a couple places, just bring it out a little bit more. Just move it that way. So then we have sort of like a three-toned pattern right now on our bird. Then what we're going to do, this still, even though it's light, this still kind of looks like that style of painting where you paint a color and then you move to a next color and move to a next color. So again, going back to our original color, we decided this was a brownish orange, so we went in the orange direction for the dry brush. So now we need to go the other direction for the next step. So if this is an orange brown, we went to orange for that, so we need to go to brown for our next step. So we are going to go with, if I can find it, we're going to go with Skeleton Horde. It's a contrast paint. Here we go. So if you think of this like a continuum, basically, we have our middle color that we did the first dry brush with. Then we went this direction for the other dry brush. Now we're going this direction for the ink. Luganeth. Sure, that sounds good to me. I guess I said lug because of the double consonant, but I'm not an English major. I don't know what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm going to take this Skeleton Horde, that is our brown contrast paint here, and I'm just going to cover the entire wing with it. This is going to meld our colors together a little bit more and make them appear more connected. But still have some variation within our wing. Hopefully we can see this on screen or on camera. Yeah, it's shiny, so you can't really see it right now. But now in person, I can see it quite a bit. On stream, Facebook stream is not the best place to see it, perhaps, but working with what we got here. So this now has multiple tones in it. But is not just lines of color. We don't want that. And because we put the final wash on top of it, it's no longer disjointed. It's all connected as if they had grown out of the same animal or whatever. There will be one more step after that, but I'm just going to now go through and do this process on the rest of the animal. So if you just wanted the feather tutorial, that is now done. I'm just going to finish the paint job, basically. So if that's all you were looking for, thank you for joining me. So just going back to the stipple again, starting with our Scrag Brown, and I'm just stippling just the tip of this. And the reason we do just the tip of this first is because this is where we're going to come back and re-stipple, and so we'll have our strongest color there. So we just want to make sure that we definitely have that section locked in. So then I go and I stipple a little bit higher on all these. And if we start, you can see right here, we sort of have a line forming there. We just take a couple of the feathers and just stipple them up a little bit higher. So we do the same thing on this wing now. And normally you could do this to the feathers all over the bird. I'm going to, or whatever you happen to be painting, I'm going to do the bottom of the bird very dark because of the base I'm putting him on, so I don't need to worry about the detail on the bottom too much. But normally I would do this on the bottom also. So I'm going to start stippling up here. Go a little bit higher in a couple places. There we go. Much better stream than this. myspace.org/seafoamgreen is best. I'm not allowed to shush. Wow. Alright, so then we're going to take the Luganeth orange again, or Luganeth, or however you'd like to pronounce it, and do this dry brush again. Making sure most of the paint is off the brush before we begin. And again, we're going to start halfway up the feathers and just draw this way. Making sure to draw towards the leading edge of the wing. And then do the same thing here. And then we're actually going to do this all the way up the back of the bird here. And then we're just going to do this as a general all-over dry brush on the bottom. Like I said, I'm going to make the bottom pretty dark. So this is just for some added contrast. It's not wildly important and could really be any light color. Just so there's something down here when I darken it up. Alright. Then the final step, come back to this skeleton horde. You have my permission. Excellent. What is the origins of the Seafoam Green obsession? The origin of the Seafoam Green obsession is Dylan is my best friend since high school. Not into miniature painting. Just watches the stream just for support. And I assume just came up with Seafoam Green as his favorite color and is now just continuing the joke for fun. I mean, it's a great color, don't get me wrong. But he is a little obsessed with it. So I'm just putting this skeleton horde all over the wings. And blend it all together. As if there's a reason. Alrighty. I'm just going to put some of this down here. Won't matter too much. Actually, I think I'm going to put this as the starting color for his head also. There we go. Alright, so then that has to dry before we can do the next step on the wings. I'm just going to do the talons real quick. It's sort of a yellowy brown color. And there's our feathers so far. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to use Nazdrag yellow. My paycheck beckons. Yep, that does make sense. So I'm just going to do the talons in this color. And the last color we're going to put on the bird itself is going to be a very pale color for dry brushing. Just to help tie all the wings in together. And I'm going to do the claws and some of that on the head also. So now I'll just do the beak real quick. And the eyeball. We'll probably come back and put a line of color or something in the eyeball, but for now, just going to do the beak in black. we go. That's fine. And then get a smaller brush and just color the eyes in black. Doesn't have to be anything special, just to get some color in there. Okay. So then we're basically just waiting for this guy to dry so we can do the last couple steps. Are you going to use the same technique for the underwings? So normally I might, but in this case I'm going to put this guy on a base you'll see in a second. And so I'm not too concerned with the detail on the underwings. I just want them to be dark and sort of be ignored, more or less, because I want the top of the bird to be seen, and like the bottom of the bird is in shadow. So, but normally, yes, I would do everything I did on the top. I would just carry it on to the bottom of the bird also. Especially in this figure where a lot of the bottom of the wing would be visible when he's sitting upright. But as you'll see how I'm going to place him on the base, it's not what I'm going for this time. So I'm just going to take some of this Cygor brown and darken the bottom of him, just to aid in, if you saw the ogre video that I did, where I enhanced the natural shadows with some black and some dark browns. This is sort of the same thing. Basically just to draw the eye away from the bottom of the bird, because it'll be less detail and it'll be darker. And that's what I want. Just do, woo! He's not glued onto his stand yet, so I can hold him like this. I'm not putting this on like a full-on contrast paint. I'm just sort of almost dry brushing it, except it's not a dry brush. I'm just sort of rubbing it on to all the bottom parts of the bird here, just to keep him a little darker. Alright, so then I'm going to go ahead and glue him onto his flight stand. And then because it's only 120 and the bird is essentially done, I prepared for this, and I thought I would do a little bit of a scenic base for him, so he had something to fly around on. Since the main purpose was the feathers, I don't need to go a lot more into him. So I'm going to grab the base here. This is a base I made on a previous stream. I think the stream's purpose was basing, making a base with cork. So I'm going to start off with, what color am I going to start with? I'm going to start with Creed Camo. This is a dark sort of army green color. I'm going to put this sort of haphazardly around, but mostly trying to get it in the natural lines of the cork here. So if you look from the side, you can see this is a bunch of cork stacked up. I'll hopefully hide this with the paint job. So we're just going to put this sort of in the patches, in the spots where the pieces of cork meet. And this will be mostly covered at the end, but it will give us some good, just some hints of green underneath the rest of the paint job, like lichen or moss or something is growing. And like I said, it doesn't matter. You can be haphazard with this. It's not a big deal, because it's mostly going to be covered anyway. So just put some here. In relation to the base, this rock is sort of leaning that way, so it would make sense that the under part of the rock, in relation to the sun, would have more moss or something on it. Put a little bit down here, maybe some up there, just a little bit up there. Alright, so there's our lichen layer. Just gonna take the bird off this thing here. There we go. Alright, then I'm gonna get Black Templar and cover basically the entire base with it. This comes out more of a dark gray more than an actual black, which is what we want. Then we're going to dry brush with a couple colors, put a couple tufts down, and add our bird, and we'll call it a day. But as you can see, or at least I hope you can see, if you look, you can sort of see, like right here, some of the green poking through the black, whereas here just looks more gray. That's what we want. We want just a hint that there's some other colors going on beneath our actual rock color. Some of my basing material is a little loose. It'll just fall off as we're painting this. Not a big deal. Just want to make sure to get... I like the contrast paint on the cork, especially when I've added extra texture to the cork, because it gets down in all the little nooks and crannies of the rock, and so we don't have any of the primer showing through. There are definitely cheaper ways to do this than using contrast paint, but that's just my preferred method right now. But you could make your own wash with like just a little bit of flow improver or even some water and some paint. Especially for this, where it's not going to be the top layer of anything, so it doesn't really matter if it's splotchy or anything like that. But when I'm attempting to demonstrate specific colors on stream, I like having the contrast paint to just... I know this is the color I'm getting. I don't have to worry about my mix going wrong or something like that. Alright, so we just got a couple spots of the primer sticking up out here. And then, because we did our bird in sort of a orangish brownish color, that's also going to determine what we do our base colors in. So I'm going to dry brush this rock with sort of a purplish gray. This purple and orange usually look good together. And it's not going to be purple like... You wouldn't necessarily be able to say, ah, yeah, it's purple. But your eye will make the connection, even subconsciously, that those colors are working well together. Just doing this little rock now. And then this even smaller rock here. So then I'm going to put some paint on the actual dirt, or the ground texture here. I'm just going to use Agarose Dunes for that. This is a slightly darker color than the skeleton horde we used on the bird earlier. So it'll just be a nice ground color. If we get some mixing with the rock color, it's not a problem. It is all existing in the same environment after all. So make sure that's all tapped in there. Alright, there we go. So now we have some ground color. So now we can move on to the dry brushing of the rock itself. And for that, I'm going to use two colors. I'm going to use, well, I thought I was going to use two colors. Oh yeah, here it is. So I'm going to use the Fang for my first color, which is sort of a bluish gray. And then I'm going to use Warp Fiend Gray for my second one. A boulder from Black Crag, yeah. So I'm going to dry brush with this bluish color first. All over the black rocks. And this is sort of going to be halfway between a dry brushing and an over brushing. Some of our black is still wet. That's not a big problem. If it mixes a little, it's okay. I'm actually going to use a third dry brush color, I just realized, but we'll start with these two, and we'll move on after these are done. So I'm just trying to still leave a little bit of that greenish, blackish color showing through, but still shift the rocks to being this color when you look at them. And what I mean by that is when you look at the rock, so when I first did the green on the rock, and I ask a person, hey, what color is that rock? They would have said, oh, it's like a beige color because of the primer, and green. Good, okay. Then I put the black on, and I would ask again, what color is that rock? And they'd say kind of a greenish, blackish, grayish color. Good. And then I'd ask again after this, and if I've done it right, I want their answer to be, well, it's blue. There's other colors featuring underneath it, but I want someone to look at this rock and say, it's blue. So that's what this is doing. Just shifting it to blue. That rock's not stamped down as much as I'd like it to be. But that's okay. We'll put a tuft there and fix that. So then we're going to go to the second dry brush, and that is Warp Fiend Gray. This is a sort of bluish, purplish color. Happy little accidents, my other paint guy says. Yep, you got it. So then with this color, I'm just going to be dry brushing on the tops of sections of the boulder. And that doesn't necessarily just mean the top, but sort of the leading edges. So this is sort of on the bottom, but if you were to take just this piece and isolate it, that would be still on the top. That's what I'm doing. I'm sure there's probably a better way to describe that, but that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going with. down. And so this sort of grayish purplish color. Blue rocks are not really a thing. I'm sure they exist some places. There are a lot of crazy like clay colors and stuff around the world, but this purplish gray will help shift it toward a more natural color, which is what we want. On these, I have some like pretty flat surfaces on some parts of this rock. I'm making sure to get some of this color on there. Hit this little rock. Alright. There's that. Now we're going to do our final dry brush on the rocks of Pallid Witch Flesh, sort of a just barely an off-white. And I'm going to do this on just the extreme edges of the rock. So right here, a couple places here. Don't want patches of this color, just like little tiny spots of it where maybe the rocks are a little bit more weathered or bleached in the sun or something like that. Couple places on this one. That little guy. Alright, so there we go. There's our rock finished, more or less. And now I'm going to take Rakarth Flesh, if I can find it. Here it is. Rakarth Flesh, and this is going to be this bird's name is Charlie Brown because he's got a rock. Excellent. So this is going to be our dry brush on our bird that I was talking about earlier, as well as stippled onto our base. So I'm going to do the bird first. This is going to be one of the lightest dry brushes you have ever seen. And this with a slightly darker color than a complete like tan or white. And we're just going to do just little spots of it in places all over the wings. Some of this may not even show up on camera, but in real life it will show up, and that's what I'm going for here. Just a couple little spots here, down here, and then here, down by the legs. And then I'm just going to stipple this same color onto the ground here, just to knock the yellow off of this color, just to give it a more. And as you can see, this is mixing with the contrast a little bit, which is absolutely fine. Just makes this sort of a flatter, sort of off-white tan color for the ground, which is what we want, instead of the super stark highlight or difference of the contrast. Stipple that down in there. A little bit more down here. Alright, so then one of the last things we have to do is pick our tufts and throw some of them on there. So I'm going to use two different kinds of tufts. These sort of brownish greenish ones, and then these reddish brownish tannish ones. So I'm just going to do this like we do every other tuft. grab one off with some tweezers. Put a little bit of glue on the bottom, and then find a good spot and stick it in there. Do them varying sizes. So we don't want a bunch of the same size tuft. Try to avoid patterns where at all possible. Do a small one under here maybe. And then a medium-sized one over here, and that'll probably be it for those. So these are our ground grasses. And then for some little plants that are maybe up in the rock here, we'll put these little green ones down. And the cork is nice because it's so soft. You can really press your tufts into the cork to make sure they're stuck down really well, and to hide the seam between the glue of the tuft and the wall of the rock. Just push those down in. I think 2 more on the rock, and then we'll call it a day. Then the last thing we have to do is glue the bird on and paint the base rim. I think I'll actually paint the base rim first. No, I think I'll glue the bird on first. So the last tuft, maybe right here, growing in the crack in the rock there. There we go. I think I'll actually put one down here on this rock, just to sort of bring these two worlds of the rock and the ground together. There we go. So there's our base mostly finished besides the base rim. Now we'll just chuck our bird on. So I'm going to take the... Oh no, I glued him on that. That's right. So I'm just going to pop the bird off of here. Just like that. Wonderful. And then we're going to glue him right here. Put some glue down in there. Take this. And just push it down into the cork. Woo! Came out of its holder. It's okay. Push it down in the cork like that. And then I'm just going to hold it here for a couple seconds. Let it dry in there, at least hopefully. I may have to mess with it off stream, but we'll see. I was hoping Little Rock would get a tuft. Yep, he got one. All right. So there's our bird flying on the rock here. And so this is why I painted him darker underneath. It's because this is like quite prominent, but I don't want people looking at the bottom of him. I want them looking at this part. So I paint that darker to direct them to this part of the model. Now he's flying over looking for something to eat or something like that. So I'm just going to paint the base rim. I'm going to do that with Cygor Brown. More difficult to hold now that the bird is on there, but that's okay. Problem with doing the base rim and then gluing the bird would have been, I would have been trying to hold the base not by the base rim while gluing the bird on. So glue that right on there, or I was thinking about gluing the bird on. Paint that right on there. And there we go. So I believe he is done. So there's our feather tutorial that we did in the beginning. And then our total finished product that is too big to fit on camera. Let me back the camera up a little bit. There we go. So there's our finished product. Base all done. Bird glued on. Ready to go. So yeah, I'm going to try to photograph this guy. It's going to be difficult. He's kind of large, but that's all right. Yeah, that'll do it for this episode. I'll be back on the Warhammer page on Friday, painting something Warhammer related. And then there again on Monday night, and then back here next Wednesday. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.